Hello, this is Dr. Scott Denstead, founder of EZWxBrief, your best online source for aviation weather and education. Welcome to episode 29 of EZWxChat, a program to discuss various topics related to aviation weather. Thanks again for joining today, and Happy New Year, first program of 2022. And as I mentioned on the Facebook page, I'm going to likely do these every other week now, primarily because we're not getting as much in the way of viewership. So I'm going to cut this back until the viewership comes up a little bit more over the next, hopefully, 6 months to a year. But nevertheless, all these particular programs will be recorded, that's the hope, and pushed out to my YouTube channel, so there's no need to actually attend live, but certainly that's the first element you'll be able to see, and there's a possibility if it's not able to be recorded, you would have missed it if you did not attend this live program. In this episode, I'm going to address some of the various different frequently asked questions about EZWxBrief. I get a lot of comments, some fairly constructive and some not so. And I'm not going to be able to, in the 30 minutes or so we have, to address all of those, but I want to take a few minutes out of each and try to make sense out of some of the more common questions I get about the EZWxBrief application, and so that you have a better kind of understanding for how EZWxBrief is set up. And first of all, I'll say that EZWxBrief is meant for route planning, and specifically for routes that are going to take you an hour or more to fly. It's not designed generally to deal with making local flights. Certainly you can use the application in that way, but the real core and crux is, the more core element, and certainly the element that I did in terms of research for this was to be able to help pilots understand the weather along their particular proposed route of flight. So we're talking about pilots making fairly significant cross-country flights, and that's again how it's set up. And so kind of the first element here that I need to push out in the frequently asked questions I get is, I'm bringing this up on Chrome or on Safari, and it just doesn't look right. There's things that are not put in the right places. Some things are cut off. And that's likely because you're not running EZWxBrief as a progressive web app. Now, I'm not going to be able to show you each and every one of the different devices to do that, but essentially a progressive web app runs in a way that it doesn't have all the aspects of a normal browser. It doesn't have an address bar, as you can see here. There's no forward and backward buttons. All that is kind of hidden by this progressive web app concept. And also you'll need to install it so it creates an icon on your home screen or desktop. The best strategy is when you sign in, go to Start and go to the Pilot's Guide. At that point, in the beginning of the Pilot's Guide, there is a starter section that allows you to kind of get started and just give you a real short overview of the application itself. Plus, below that is the guide to help you install this as a progressive web app. So once you do that, it has the look and feel of any native application without having to get involved with Google Play Store or the App Store at all. You don't even have to do that. So if there's a new release that I put out, that will come along the next time you bring up the app. So it makes it really easy for you, and it takes a lot less time to install than any app you'll get on the App Store, and it won't take up any additional space on your device. That's the advantage there. So let's go into one of the other elements here, and I'm going to essentially, first of all, point out that the goal of this is that when you sign in, it takes you to the home page here, I know I have had a lot of people say I don't need all this advertisement about it, but certainly somebody who is new may want to discover more about this, let's say, vertical route profile. So it gives you a little information about that. And I'm not trying to sell you more of the product. It's there for you. It's just the home page that comes up first. And eventually I'm going to provide the ability to skip this. But for now, that's the way it is. When you essentially sign in, this comes to that particular page. But up in the upper right, you'll see the Start button. This is the only place the Start button is kind of not in the same place as the rest of the app. So the Start button is in the upper right. But in all other pages, it's going to be in the upper left, and it's going to be there. So it's not like it's being thrown around all over the place. That Start button will be your friend, and it will have all the information you need, essentially, to get to any part of the application. It couldn't be any more simple than that. So if you want to manage your favorites, you can go to it from there. You want to plan a route, it basically takes you to the map page. You want to look at specific airport weather, the mediograms, skew-T diagrams, all those are underneath that. Static weather imagery, just what it says. If you want to view some of the various different online workshops, manage your preferences or settings, that's there for you, and manage your account. For instance, if you wanted to sign up for auto renew for $69, you could certainly do that by going to your profile, and there's a way to sign up for auto renew there. And of course, viewing the pilot's guide and signing out. And I don't recommend that folks sign out of the app, essentially close the app itself, but the next time when you log in, make sure you check the button that says I want to be remembered. So the next time you do log in, it will provide you with all the password information, and will sign you automatically back in, and you will have to remember your password and stuff like that. So it makes it a lot easier from that perspective. So the very first thing I tell folks to do when they come in is to essentially plan a route. But in the end, what I often will tell folks is that once you get into the application, you're going to have to set up some of your various different settings. And I'm not going to go into that in detail here for this particular session, but you'll put your settings in, and you get to those basically by going up to the settings cog. So that's an icon that most pilots are familiar with. It's a settings or cog icon. Then you can set your home airport, your preferences, your aircraft settings, such as your airspeed, true airspeed, and your personal minimums all have to be set at some point in time. Then right next to that is this list icon, and you can see it says your favorites right there. And I would recommend setting that up. For this particular user, I don't have any of that set up yet. This is the default. And you can change these to whatever you want. You can right mouse click if I'm using my Windows 10 computer and rename this, or you can delete it. The only thing you can't delete is the root icon here for EZWxBrief. You can add new folders under this, and I use this as the portal into the app itself. So I'm setting up, I'm planning a flight, I create a route, I put a bunch of favorites in. It allows me to kind of set this up, my imagery favorites, my route favorites, my airport favorites, all that I can plug into and create a separate folder for that. And that's how I come into the app. That's my workflow. I basically pull that together so that now I don't have to really navigate around the app. I'm just going to my favorites to click through that. And so let's say I'm going to be flying in a few days from now. So I look at the long-range forecasts. I have all that in there. I eventually will, as I get closer to the time of departure, I will be potentially looking at other information. I'll still have my route all defined. That will all be there. So every time I come back into the app the next day to check the weather, I'm basically working from this set of favorites. Makes it really easy to use, and you don't have to worry about where icons are located in such in many situations. You just basically have to work from your favorites. Makes it easy. And then again, you can go to the start and then go to plan a route, and that will take you to the map display. And I recommend everybody start their route planning from the map. And again, that's really to make sure that you're planning the flight that you intend to fly. You didn't fat finger the wrong intersection or waypoint in your route, and you're looking at details that are not anywhere related to that. So it's a good idea, just like you would with a GPS, to plan the route, kind of zoom out, make sure that that's really the route you want. And that's really something that's done from the map view. Now you'll notice at the bottom that in this particular case, there absolutely is no route defined, because this is the generic kind of time slider that you'll see on the application itself. And in fact, you can, for instance, I can create a route, and I'll show you how to do that. And when I'm done, I can delete the route, so I come back to this generic screen. It helps kind of refresh the screen much quicker. So if you look at the icons here, none of these, I don't have dozens of icons here. They're pretty basic, and they use common, for the most part, common icons, symbols that most pilots should be able to easily figure out and understand. And if you don't, you essentially hover your mouse over those and it will tell you what that's all about. Now I know you can't do that on a touch screen, so again, this is part of the overall pilot's guide that I've developed that is really described in pretty good detail in the pilot's guide if you take a few minutes to read through that. Nevertheless, I still have my start button in the upper left, and so I can go to any of those other pages. If I want to skip directly to looking at the static weather imagery, I can do that very quickly from here. Click on that, and it will take me to that static weather imagery. Or let's go back to the route display itself and work through the other icons here. So the one that's next to that is really just a map selector. I like to see the dark. That's just me. There's a lot of good contrast. You could want to see the terrain or topo charts. It just depends on what you're looking for. And this is remembered from session to session, so once you set it up, that's all you have to do. You really don't even have to touch that anymore. The next one is the airport selector. This takes you to the airport page where you can look at airport specific things like METARs, terminal forecast, you can look at SKU-T diagrams, you can look at forecast discussions. All those elements are in there. Here's your route editor, so if you want to create a new route, this is where you go first. And so that's what we're going to eventually do. And the next one is the route profile, but you need a route to see a profile, so you first of all have to create a route. So if I were to click on route profile right now, it says no active route exists. And on the right, there's the standard refresh button. There's the settings we saw on the home page, and the I is for information. In this case, it's legends. So if you want to see legends, you could do that, and that way you can see all the various different pilot report symbols that are out there. Makes it really easy to understand what you're looking at on the screen, on the map. Then there's our list icon we saw on the home page for your favorites. Once again, you can add whatever favorites you want and build up those so that that becomes your portal into the application. You have the plus and minus. That's just for zooming in and zooming out on the map itself. Again, pretty self-explanatory. And this thing at the top tends to confuse pilots. I know that. They tend to start typing routes in. This is really your 7-day forecast. So whatever the 7-day forecast is, this is your 7-day forecast for your particular airport that you're concerned about. Or in the case of a town, you can actually put in a town in here. So I can put in the town that's nearby me, Marvin, North Carolina, and put that in, and that will provide me with the information for that particular town. So that's not a route editor. The route editor is over here on the left side. So there are all your icons, and that's it. That's the extent of it. There's nothing more than that. We're not talking anything deeper. There's no other layers beyond that. That's essentially it. Now the route editor is pretty easy to understand. The only thing that I would strongly encourage you to do, and it has to be done, is when you enter in any kind of waypoint, whatever that may be, let it fill it in and pick from the list. At that point, you pick from the list. I put in Charlotte Douglas International. It does a validation for you. And if I wanted to put in another VOR, for instance, I could do that, and I could put in my final destination here. I'll put in, let's say, Jacksonville, JAX, there it is. and now it's validated that route, that it's a good route essentially. And you can put in, for the route of flight, up to 5 different waypoints. They can be airports, VORs, they can be intersections, fixes. I don't have the ability to put in NDBs right now, but essentially everything else works. And most NDBs are located right at airports, so you can put the airport identifier in instead. You choose your altitude, whatever the altitude you want here. And then you want to use the forecast winds aloft to make essentially understand what the winds are doing to you. And again, that's based on setting up the proper true airspeed that you have in your settings. And then you can essentially create a favorite for that. So I could create now a favorite for that. I can rename this to whatever I want. I can do, say this is from Charlotte to Jacksonville. And then now I can add that to the folder, or I can put it in another folder, my routes, or I can even add a new folder right there to add that in. So I can create a new route or a new folder called my flight. Add that in. And now my new folder is in there. And I can save that. Now I'll always have that folder available to me with that route in there, so I could go into my favorites and recover or retrieve that route if I wanted to. I can click apply, and basically at that point it will go through and it will utilize all my personal minimums, and it will figure this out over the next 66 hours essentially here. So it goes out even at 9Z. It's looking a little bit further along your route of flight to whenever you get to that point, your time or your time of arrival at your destination is considered. So there's my route on there, and now essentially I could add in any layers on the map I wanted to, starting with pilot weather reports, looking at graphical airmets, SIGMETs, radar depiction, various different station markers, and center weather advisories. I can add to that. So that allows me to quickly kind of see over the next period of time where the most significant weather is located. And again, if you wanted to look at the legends here, you can certainly do that. And that way it will give you an indication of what all these various different icons are for. Makes it quick and simple, easy to use. So in less than 10 minutes, I was able to give you a quick overview of how to set this up so that you can start using it. And again, it's pretty quick and easy to use. Now, if I want to then kind of explore more details about the route, I could essentially then go in and zoom in. If you have a mouse, you can use your mouse wheel to zoom in that way. And then at that point in time, that allows me to kind of see the weather along the route at the time that's shown on this departure advisor that I can slide in back and forth. And you'll also see how this is being evaluated. So every single column here I can click on, and I can see how my personal minimums are evaluated against that particular route. So it gives me, again, a quick understanding that this particular departure time at 9Z in the morning is going to be potentially have some issues with ceiling height along my route of flight, surface visibility, and some issues with my destination ceiling height and visibility as well. Although everything else, based on what I've put up here, is not problematic in this particular case. And then at this point in time, I could essentially look at my route profile. Now that I have a route defined, I could do that. But let me first of all say, if you want to, let's say, delete the route, I'm done for the day, I'm done looking at this, I've got my route saved in my favorites here. Here's my favorites, there's my flight there, and there's my route that I have set up. All looks good. I can actually go to the route editor, and you'll notice there's a delete route function there. If I delete that, it will delete it out so the next time I come into the application, it doesn't take so long essentially to build all this associated with a route. It's pretty quick at that point. So let's look at the route profile, and you'll see that the route profile is built pretty quickly now because we already have a route defined ultimately it's there, and it took less than 5 seconds to build that particular display. I know a lot of folks have said that EZWxBrief is kind of slow, and yes, on the first instance of it, it will be a little bit slower because it's building a lot of information. It's taking a lot of data, but once it's built, it's able to utilize all that data, so it provides you with a really nice, quick depiction of the wind, cloud information, icing, if there is any, and essentially turbulence associated with that particular departure time. So there's our turbulence, and if there was any icing there, it would show up here, but unfortunately, there's a lot of clear sky here, not a lot of icing to be concerned about, so you won't see it there for this particular route, which again is good news for you if you're not interested in getting yourself into any icing. This gives you a clear indication that there's no icing for that particular departure time. But there is, in this case, we can see that there is some potential turbulence, but not a lot. Anything that you see with the colors, again, if you want to say, what do these colors mean, go to the eye icon here, the information icon, and then you can see what's happening with the colors for these different things. So we have light turbulence, moderate, severe, and extreme showing up there. If you were looking at airframe icing, there's the legend for that as well. And then, of course, you also have the information here, including at the very bottom a wind station model. I get that question a lot. What does the winds mean here? And essentially, when you look at the winds, let's go ahead and bring that up here. Let's go ahead and bring the wind up. And so every one of these wind models, you'll see, if we go to here, that the temperature aloft is presented kind of in the upper right, and that will be in degrees Celsius or Fahrenheit, depending on how you have your settings implemented. This shows you in green that there's a tailwind. If it was a headwind, it would show you that in red, and it shows you the tailwind or headwind component based on that in knots. And the magenta line here is your aircraft course. So this shows that you're headed essentially eastbound. In this particular case, if you look at the actual route itself here from Charlotte to Jacksonville, that's actually in a kind of a southwesterly heading. So again, it gives you that information pretty quickly, and then you can essentially tell that yes, I'm going to definitely have a headwind. The winds are out of the south here, and therefore I expect to see a headwind, but it calculates that headwind component. And in some cases where the headwind, when the wind is almost directly, essentially perpendicular, you may see a 0, or you may even see a C, which stands for calm or light and variable winds at that particular altitude. And this allows you to, again, look at a little bit more refinement in terms of altitude. So I can look at the max altitude here on the left at 250. Look at the 150 here is the top altitude. And the bottom that you see here, I get this question a lot, is what's happening with this? Well, the 0Z is the time that you're planning to depart, and this is using your whatever the in this particular case aircraft settings are for your true airspeed, and it's factoring in those winds aloft and calculating a ground speed. So it says that you're going to arrive at this segment point here, which is 30 miles from their departure time at 0012 Zulu. It doesn't factor in the time it takes to climb or descend at this particular point in time. It's basically assuming you take off and are flying at 140 knots in this particular case, plus winds factor in there. And it also gives you, and let me just say that this is just a cumulative situation as you go along, and it also provides you with whatever, in this particular case we are using CTF, the VOR, Chesterfield VOR, as one of our route points. It shows that, and then it shows you other kind of proximity waypoints along your route, so you can see kind of how you're passing by some of these other ones. And all these have information, kind of tooltips that pop up, and then lastly, that brown area is essentially the terrain as well. And at the top, generally just a kind of an overview of the weather at that particular point in time, whether it's going to be sunny, rain, freezing rain, thunderstorms, convection, all that kind of stuff will show up there as well. And you notice also the color of the background changes daytime and nighttime, so it knows sunrise and sunset and so forth. And then you also have your various different isotherms here, either in degrees Celsius or Fahrenheit, depending on how you have that set up. Once again, the same icons that we saw on the map display are shown here on the right, and as a result of that, you also can go back to the map view. You can go to the airport, or you can actually change your route here. So if I, for instance, I don't want to go through the Chesterfield DOR, want to go directly to Jacksonville, I can do that and hit apply, and that will then update the entire route. So again, it's going to take a bit of time to go through and do that. You saw that that was about 5 seconds or less to make that change. So it's fairly quick. We tried to optimize this as much as we can because we know that folks don't want to sit around and wait. And a lot of this depends on how many users are actually using the application at the time, and it also may depend also on the length of the route. The shorter the route, the quicker this is going to be, but it's doing a lot of work behind the scenes to pull in a lot of different model data to produce this particular forecast for you. And there are certainly other videos I have that talk about this, setting your personal minimums and the departure advisor you see here at the bottom. And kind of the next only other big major element here would be your airport selector. This is based on your home airport initially, and you can make a change to this. There is a home button, so you can go to your home airport at any time. And then you can also create, once again, a favorite. I can save this in any new folder. I can find the folder I just created here, which is my flight, and then I can essentially save KCLT, or I can make a change to this and say Charlotte Douglas, for instance, and save that, and that will be saved in my folder that I just set up here as an airport favorite. The other element to this is that I can go right back to the route profile, the map display, my start button again in the same location up in the upper left, and I also can go to this what's called like a menu hierarchy button here and look at the meteogram, which is this, as well as I can look at any terminal forecast that may be there, any METARs. I can bring up a SKU-T diagram, look at the forecast discussion, or look at the localized aviation MOS program, MOS product there. And I can do all the same things with wind, clouds, icing, turbulence, and such at that particular point in time. So in this case, there's not any airport. I can change this from a 3-day kind of look to just a single day. Not much going on at this particular airport. And I have below this some time series graphs with some information available as well, where you can hover or click on these or tap on these with a touchscreen device and see what's happening with each one of those. So these are essentially the way you can kind of see the weather as it's changing for a particular airport along that, for that particular location. Last but not least is the weather imagery. And again, this is pretty quick, and you can choose from a ton of imagery. Probably I'll spend at some point in time do another program on the imagery alone, so you can gain a pretty good understanding for how to use some of this imagery, but it includes a lot of really useful imagery. One of my favorites here is this WRF-ARW model. It's got the simulate reflectivity product, which has generally been very good. It really gives you a really good understanding for how the weather is shaping up from the standpoint of a future radar or a forecast radar or a simulate reflectivity standpoint over the next 48 hours. So it gives you that kind of look and feel that you're really comfortable with in terms of whether or not you're going to be dealing with precipitation, and just how intense will that precipitation be. And again, there's a lot of ways you can get back to all the other things, as well as essentially going back to your favorites. And I could go back to my flight. I could go back to my route profile right from here now that I have set that up. So again, the workflow is really easy to understand and how to use if you use your favorites properly. It's not too complicated. Right, that wraps up episode 29 of EZWxChat. My name is Dr. Scott Denstead, and as always, I hope you enjoy the simplicity of EZWxBrief.